And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Super pleased to have back in the studio with me Charles Sauer. He's a libertarian, economist, president of the Market Institute. MarketInstitute.org is the website. You can tweet him at Market Institute or at Charles Sauer, S-A-U-E-R. Charles, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here with us. There's an article in The Guardian today by Poppy Noor, and the headline is Sex for Rent. It's the logical extension of leaving housing to the so-called free market. And she writes about these ads that are popping up in particularly like in the Silicon Valley area, you know, in these very high rent, you know, like San Francisco and things, very high rent towns that, I mean, this is literally from one of these ads, you know, you want a nice bedroom and this part I'm not reading from the ad, but you know, but I'm going to get to it. Basically, you want your own bedroom and a nice apartment, you know, that overlooks the city, and it's a, you know, 3,000 square foot apartment. It's a fancy place, right? And looking at it, you know, okay, this is going to be
everything's great,
$6,000 a month, right?
Yep.
And it's only $200 a month. But, and then here's the language: frequent nudity. This is what you're expected to do, right? Frequent nudity and overt flaunting, flashing, important, as is willingness to be infrequently watched remotely through a camera and photographed. In other words, sex for rent.
In other words, creepy landlord.
Well, yeah, absolutely creepy landlord. But isn't that absolutely consistent with the libertarian worldview?
Sure. In a libertarian worldview, as should be from the left worldview, creeps exist, right? So, but leave it to the left to think that we should regulate the world's oldest profession. You know, so. Do I want my daughters moving into that guy's apartment? No. And I'm going to do everything I can to put them on I guess a moral track not to move into that, but that's my moral track as defined by my family. Other people can define what their own morals are on that. But I'm also going to try to give them the financial foothold that if they somehow don't decide to follow what my morality would be, that they've got the financial stability to be able to decide on their own.
There's a lot of women out there, and men for that matter, who don't have the privilege, who don't have the wealth, who don't have the access that you and your daughters have. And so, you know, but it's interesting you mentioned the world's oldest profession, because essentially this is a variation on prostitution. It's trading sex for something rather than trading it for money. It's trading it for housing. Yep. And at that point, you know, those of us who argue that sexual behavior between consenting adults, even if it involves money, should not be the business of government.
Yep.
And that's a libertarian position that I share. Should look at this, I guess, you know, if I was to be intellectually consistent, look at this and say, well, okay, if they're consenting adults and they want to do this, they should be able to do this.
There's an interesting video on this.
If I can, just real quickly. Right. But at the same time, don't we as a society, because these are by and large not, this is like encouraging what essentially is prostitution, right? This is reaching out to desperate people and saying, come to me and I'll trade you sex for housing. It seems that, which is a different thing from like in Europe, you know, where there's brothels and that are licensed and you can become a sex worker, but you're licensed and all this kind of stuff. It seems like that as a society, as a culture, we have an obligation to and now, you know, I guess I'm sounding like a liberal, but which is fine with me, to protect vulnerable people. This is my concern, and this is I think the legitimate hit on prostitution is that the majority of prostitutes, particularly in countries where prostitution is illegal, that the majority of prostitutes are coming from desperate social economic classes, yep, as opposed to just, hey, you know, wouldn't it be fun to have sex and get paid for it? That there's, you know, not a real connection to that. Don't we have an obligation to say, wait a minute, we're going to draw some lines here, because we don't want people wandering into this soft prostitution and then end up with their lives ruined?
I mean, I think that one of the reasons why I am small government is that I think that when the government comes in and tries to start defining where those lines are, that there's almost no way that they can correctly define it. But there is an interesting.
They is us.
Well, no, they is not us. They is elected officials.
We the people. The first three words of the Constitution.
Controlled by 51% of the electorate, which is great. But right now we have a Trump presidency. We have a Trump government. Do we want the Trump government defining our morals? No. Do I want a Warren government defining our morals? No. Maybe if you were defining morals, Thom, I would let you define the morals.
I'm not so much talking about morality as, well, I guess I am, but I'm talking about exploitation. And I'm not sure that exploitation falls into that frame of, well, sure, it's a moral frame. And what's wrong with government defining morality? I mean, we say you shall not kill, right? That's a moral argument. You shall not beat people up. That's a moral argument. You shall not steal.
I don't think that those are just moral arguments. Killing somebody goes to taking away their rights.
So you view it as an economic transaction, as a theft, essentially, theft of life.
Yeah, I mean it's a theft of life. It's a taking of something that you shouldn't take. So
what's a moral argument? What differentiates that from a moral argument?
Well, in this is two consenting adults that would be entering into something. So if you want to define, you would have to define one party as incapable of making the decision there. But I think let's go up one other stage.
No. If I can, please. One of the things bless you. One of the things that libertarians say is that they're opposed to force.
Yeah.
Right. And my argument is always there's a whole lot of force beyond government force. If I'm sick, that's a force. If I'm hungry, that's a force. If I'm outside and cold and don't have a place to live, that's a force. Poverty is a force. And poverty is a force that makes people vulnerable to, I think creepy landlord is too generous a description for these people, exploiters. And therefore, we as a society should be dealing with those forces, should we not?
I don't think that these are, I don't think the ones in Silicon Valley are necessarily exploiters. I think that these sound like creepy landlords. I believe that what you're saying is if this took over the market as an idea, I think there would probably be exploiters in there. And the question is what does the government regulation mean to the possible tenants' choices? But the part that I kept wanting to that I want to get to is the contractual part of this, because there is a question of can somebody contract their own body, and this takes, I think, what's a serious conversation and kind of makes light of it. But there was a BuzzFeed video that talked about could you do the 50 Shades of Grey sexual contract, and the end result that the lawyer came out with from that conversation was that yes, you probably could enforce most of the 50 Shades of Grey contract, which becomes interesting here. I mean, the basic idea is somebody can enter into this contract if they would like to. And
this was the S&M book, right? So basically the woman was contracting to say, yes, you can beat me up, but there are certain limits or something like that.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I'm not.
No. I mean, I haven't even read the book, but there was a sexual contract in the book that put limits on what that was. And so they just had fun with this on BuzzFeed and said, hey, is this contract enforceable? And the end result, again, yes. And so I think here is somebody entering into a contract. It shouldn't be the government coming and doing it. Now, on the other hand, if that landlord
but the government enforces contracts. You can't have a contract. I mean, a contract without the force of government is useless.
I agree with that. And that's what I'm saying. We have the government would be able to enforce, would likely be able to enforce these contracts. And so, I mean, but so we have two grown-ups entering into a contract that's enforceable by government. I don't think it's something that we should get in between.
Interesting. I'll be interested to hear what my callers have to say about this afterwards too. Let me speaking of contracts, and you and I were talking about this before. We just have a minute or two left, but the idea of government basically providing welfare to Bill Gates, copyright laws, patent laws, and trademark laws. Thomas Jefferson was of the opinion that they were okay to encourage the development of science and the useful arts, I think is the phrase in the Constitution. But he thought that there should be a limit of 3 years. He himself refused to patent or trademark anything he did, or copyright anything he did, on principle. And I agree with that principle. And as somebody who actually makes his living, part of my living anyway, writing books.
Yep.
So how can a libertarian justify big government supporting Bill Gates' ability to lock down the source code of Microsoft for years and years, or probably a better example, Disney and the mouse, long after Walt is dead? How can you justify that?
I will say that the conversations get trickier when we start talking about copyright and trademarks. But patents are in the Constitution. It's one of the only issues that
three of them are in the same sentence.
But it's an issue that we actually talk about that's in the Constitution. And the difference between why it's in the Constitution is that before, the king gave the writs of ownership to ideas. And so who did he give them to? Well, the wealthy upper class. And so what patents have done for our economy is give the ability for Black people to get out of poverty. I did an event with Dr. Lonnie Johnson, the inventor of the Super Soaker, 3 months ago. It has let women who haven't had the economic opportunities as some men for a long time to be able to patent an invention and get themselves out of poverty.
You ever tried to patent something? It costs a minimum of $10,000 and it takes a couple of years.
It takes a minimum of 10 to 20,000 to get a defensible patent out now, but that hasn't always been the case. Yeah. That's kind of a newer phenomenon. But the fact is I know people that have spent, $400 or $60 to get their pending patent, to get patent pending, and they're able to sell that. There's a mother in North Carolina that I bring up here all the time to talk about her invention.
Okay, well, we'll have to continue this conversation another time. We're hitting a break here. Charles Sauer, Libertarian economist and president of the Market Institute, marketinstitute.org. You can tweet him at Market Institute or at Charles Sauer. Charles, thanks.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.